Ben to the rack, lays it up, no, but we do have the whistle and a foul. And Ben just went after our 10.
Oh, that's not
we
good.
got trouble right here in the Motor City.
Welcome to Growing Up Punk, the podcast about punk rock and all of its friends. My name is David, and I'm actually recording this intro from the back deck at my parents' house. So that's pretty rad. Anyway, on this episode, we've got an interview with the guys from American Arson. Before we get into that, though, just thought I'd say, hey, go ahead and follow us on our social media networks at Growing Punk Pod. You'll find us on Instagram. You'll find us on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We're everywhere. The podcast is also available wherever you get podcasts. So make sure you tell all of your friends. Now, before we get into the interview, just thought I'd share a little bit with you what the interview is about. As I said, it's with the guys from American Arson. That's Evan, who plays guitar and vocals, and Jesse, who's on drums and vocals. And yeah, we get to talk about a lot of stuff, about what it means to be in a two-piece and what that looks like, playing, recording, that kind of stuff. And also talking about one of their favorite records, a record that inspired them greatly over the years, that being Fake News by the band Let Live. So without further ado, let's get into it. We also chat about their brand new album, A Line in the Sand. So let's waste no more time. It's me chatting with Jesse, chatting with Evan of American Arson. So I thought we'd start kind of like back at, I guess you could say, the beginning. Kind of how did you get into punk rock or post-hardcore, whatever, just like this kind of music, this scene of music. So, I mean, Evan, if you wanted to start, that'd be cool. You could share your story a little bit, first band maybe, or album or something.
Yeah. So I grew up, I think I was probably in middle school when I really got turned on to any sort of alternative music. I grew up going to ska concerts actually when I was in middle school, ska concerts,
Yeah.
punk concerts. And whenever anybody would roll through, I just kind of beg my parents, just before I could drive, to let me go, or get a few friends together.
Yeah.
So I started playing piano when I was like 5 years old. So we have a music background. My mom was a piano and voice teacher. So me and all my brothers took like classically trained piano, but I started playing guitar then in middle school. And when I was in high school, that was sort of the emergence of the sort of like the emotional hardcore revival.
Right.
This was
Yeah,
near
yeah.
the end of the 90s. And a lot of bands that were coming out that were inspired sort of by Fugazi and Rites of Spring and Mineral and Braid and those kind of bands. But then we're putting a little bit more of a melodic twist on it, or maybe taking the hardcore element out of it, quite a bit. So bands like Further Seems Forever and Jimmy Eat World and the Juliana Theory, that were sort of driving that emotional hardcore movement more towards the melodic side.
Yeah.
So I grew up kind of right in that divide, where you would have hardcore bands and, I guess this emo, the new like second wave of emo bands playing together. And to me, that was just like everything I wanted in music. You had the melody, and it was totally acceptable to bring something all the way down to just the stripped down to just a clean plucked guitar and one guy singing, and then all the way up to just screams and full bands roaring away. And so those were kind of like my influence that shaped me growing up. And I played in some bands that were closer to the punk side. I played in some bands that were closer to the melodic or poppier side.
Yeah.
And then I think that's kind of what you get with American Arson, is sort of just a conglomeration of all of that. So
it's a bit of a mix. I was gonna say I feel like I've been pushing this book a lot lately. It's because I just read it. But have you ever read the book Post by Eric Grubbs?
I have not.
Oh man, if you
No.
can find it, find it. Yeah, I'll send it to you in the mail. No, but if you can find it, it documents like that whole. It goes through kind of starting back in like the DC, like hardcore, post-hardcore scene
Yep.
with Rites of Spring, Fugazi, stuff like that, and moves on forward kind of like with each band as it comes along through like Jawbox, Jawbreaker. It ends, I think, with Jimmy Eat World, but it covers Glassjaw, like all sorts of stuff. It's so good.
That's
man.
really sweet.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't read a ton of
out.
books. Yeah, I don't read a ton of books, but I love music books. So, Jesse, what about you? How did you kind of discover punk rock, I guess?
I mean, I'm gonna tell a story really rare and unique to kids growing up in the 90s, and that's I got my hands on a Blink-182 CD. And
okay.
No, that, I mean, I guess like I grew up in the church and like playing at church and stuff like that, and going to a lot of the like Christian alternative festivals and stuff, and so I was familiar with a lot of those bands. But when I was several years old, I got my hands on a Blink CD and started listening to like earlier like Foo Fighters stuff, and being influenced by people like Dave Grohl and Travis Barker as a drummer. And obviously Dave Grohl was fronting Foo Fighters, but from his Nirvana days and stuff. And then around, I want to say 2000, 2001 or 2 or something. I was only several years old at the time. And I got my hands on one of the first Under Oath CDs.
Right, yeah.
And that Changing of Times, actually, before they even had their current, or what's their probably most well-known lineup, when Dallas was still fronting the band, that I got my hands on that, and I was like, holy crap, this is awesome. I would watch videos of like Aaron Gillespie playing drums and just like absolutely beating the living crap out of his drums and just like flinging himself everywhere, and just like that looks like so much fun. And it reminded me of guys like Dave Grohl and stuff when they would play and everything. And so that was really the start of it for me. I would literally sit there and watch like videos, sit in front of a TV. I literally, there's photos of me sitting like with my drums set up with a TV like about as far from my drums as this computer is from me now. And for those listening, we can see each other on the screen. But it was like right there, and there's photos of me just sitting there like watching music videos of those guys and playing along to like Foo Fighters and Blink and Under Oath music videos and stuff. So those three were really big for me back in the day. And then obviously a little later into that, the band we're actually kind of focusing on today, Let Live, not a few years so later, was when I first got a hold of them, and they completely changed my life, both as a musician, like performance wise, and just as a fan. So
Sweet. It's funny that you bring up the music video side of things and early Under Oath, because I can remember, I don't know how many times I watched the video for Until the Sun Sleeps.
Oh yeah.
And just like, there's a part, I want to say it's Tim like kicks Dallas, maybe just like back kicks him, and I just like watch it over and over. I'm like, what is this?
Dude, I bought when they started releasing live DVDs for some of their stuff later on, I would buy those and literally just like play them over and over. I think I had to buy multiple copies of those things because I just wear them out.
Yeah. So you mentioned there, we're going to talk about Let Live in a minute, but I thought we could kind of talk about you guys and your new record a little bit before we get into that. I mean,
no one wants to hear about that.
Yeah, come on now. But so how did you guys meet? Like, how did you start a band? Where did that come from?
Well, two guys walked into a bar.
I basically started as a solo project, just trying to make some music with as few people as possible. I was in a band where we had a lot of awesome opportunities and did a whole lot of touring, and it basically just fell apart because it was difficult for us to maintain the relationships.
You were going to say I was in a band. We were pretty awesome.
No, no, we had a lot of good opportunities. We had a good grassroots following going, and there was no reason for the band to derail other than the relationships deteriorating in the band, which wasn't any person in particular's fault. It was just a product of the fact that we were on the road all the time,
Right.
kind of doing it DIY, so there weren't really any creature comforts. And we didn't have a whole lot of money to come home to or anything like that.
Yeah.
I just watched those relationships deteriorate, and I kind of got it in my head that it would be a great idea to just do something with as few people as possible and remove some of those variables, not out of spite, just more out of, I've said before, it's the same reason why I ride a single speed road bike, right? There's no gears. There's less of a chance that I'm 25 minutes away from my house or 25 miles away from my house and something breaks. So it's just
Right.
one speed. It's easier that way.
Yeah.
So I was hiring a drummer for a little while, and he was a great guy. But he was doing his own thing. He was playing in a band that he was actually, a full-time member of, and so it became impractical after a while. And if you're a solo artist, it's kind of strange too to just be hiring one other person. It's just like there's half the people on the stage are hired at that point to compare to the one person who's like, I guess, the name bearer. So I just decided I wanted somebody that was like equally as invested in the band as myself, and kind of put that information out there. And came across Jesse online through some mutual friends, and did a little audition, just kind of more like a meet and greet. Yeah. And then we we started playing together, and then obviously it just it made more sense to for us to be, it became more of a traditional band at that point, with more than just one dude kind of steering the ship.
Yeah, people ask us all the time, like, about he kind of touched on it, about like the benefits or the cons or whatever of having just two people in the band, and he nailed it there. It's like, it's not even just, like he said, it's not just out of spite, but like having fewer members, there's only two of us. So like, there's some cons in terms of we have a crap load of gear. So it's, in the early days before we could bring a crew with us, it was just the two of us loading it all in and out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like he touched on, like on a personal level, we know we're good, so we're good. You're not trying to get personally, professionally, whatever, you're not trying to get 5 people on the same page. You're trying to get 2.
Totally.
So as long as we know each other are good, we're good. And it makes it, everything, decision making, songwriting, whatever it is, a lot easier that way.
That's awesome. So how do you, like, as a two-piece, you've got, like a big sound as it is, and I mean, you can do anything really going into a studio if it's just two of you,
fake.
But yeah, it's all fake. But
you're right. You can fake anything in a studio.
Right. But at the same point, I know, like, I think I don't know if I read it or you hinted at, but do you do live looping sort of stuff when you play?
Yes.
Yeah. So I do a couple different things. The number one thing is that I split my guitar signal to a guitar amp and a bass amp. I won't go into all the technical stuff because there's probably some people who don't care about that at all. Right. But I split my guitar signal to a guitar amp and a bass amp, and the side that goes to the bass amp is pitched an octave down, and then I tune the guitar way down too. So it's basically, covering the sonic range that you would expect from a guitar and a bass. But then we also have some songs where we do what's called live looping. So if somebody's not familiar with, guitar nerd kind of stuff, basically that means that I play a part, I press a pedal, that part plays back again. I basically just recorded it on the fly, and then I play a different part over that. And some songs we have, it'll just, there'll just be one loop or one layer to the loop, and we have some songs that have 6 or 7 layers to it. And then Jesse sort of monitors that looping process in his ears, and so that we can stay tight together. So we used to be, like 100%, like every song had looping, and that was sort of like our calling card. And then with the last couple of releases, we've branched out a little bit, and the most recent album is about 70-30 songs that don't have looping, in favor of songs that don't have looping versus songs that do.
Right. Yeah.
Really, the only thing that's not, when you see us live, the only things that aren't like physically being played by us live are like the big orchestral parts. And as much as we'd love to tour with a full orchestra and do like a Bring Me the Horizon live set style type of thing, like
choir,
like maybe one day, but I mean we can't. So that's the big like orchestral intros or big like horn stuff or whatever, like you like that stuff is on the track, but that's, I would say, a minority of what you see. Like all the guitars, all the drums, all the vocals, none of that is tracked. So that's the one thing, is he kind of alluded to it, we with this last record, the full length especially, we wanted to find a way to be able to grow creatively and kind of push our boundaries and be able to write some new sounding stuff and just grow as a band artistically, while still being able to stay true to, like, we didn't want to be, and there's nothing against some of the artists that where they do have like one or two members and maybe a lot of their stuff is on track. They're phenomenal songwriters and stuff, but we just kind of felt like we wanted to keep it authentic and have most of our stuff be live. But being able to add some of those bigger orchestral parts and stuff, and still keep all the real instruments like the guitars and drums live was a good kind of middle ground for us. But it allowed this album to venture into some different areas while hopefully still staying a little familiar for people who have heard our other stuff.
Yeah, no, it's great. So when writing a song and factoring in things like loops, how do you stop yourself from just layering upon layering? Because like I can only imagine sitting down with, like, I play guitar myself, and I can only imagine sitting down with a guitar and just being like, okay, that sounds cool, but now what if I do this over time, and just continuing to build. How do you like do you go in with kind of like like limits set, or do you just go with what happens?
I think the thing that constrains us is that at our heart we are writing within the sort of traditional pop rock song structure, where there's going to be verses and choruses and bridges and all of those types of things, versus a post rock band, maybe like a band like Caspian, or a band like Explosions in the Sky, where they're going to be a lot more freeform with their song structure. They might be able to do something like that, and we've played with a couple really cool post rock bands that have more of a linear song structure rather than the verses and the choruses and that sort of stuff. So when you set out to say like, hey, we're going to stick basically to this traditional sort of punk rock ideal, that there's going to be verses, there's going to be choruses, the songs are going to be usually around 3 to 5 minutes, something like that. It's not to say that we stick to a formula. Like there's times we go outside of that. There's we had a really short track that that started the album, a really long track that closed the album. But when you think about it that way, when you think about it as like, what does somebody want to hear, I think it might be interesting to a few people to see a guy on a stage just recording loop after loop after loop. But I think most people, they want to make an emotional connection to the song, and they do that through melody, and they do that through lyrics, and then they do that through having those melodies and those lyrics repeated enough times to kind of set the hook, but not so many times that it gets repetitive and boring. And so when you approach it like that, you sort of lose the temptation to just whack on 57 layers, because
as much as your guitar as much as our musician friends or our band buddies like might enjoy it and like be super into it, like they we trying to find that balance between like having a chorus people can sing along to, or a punk verse that people can mosh or headbang to or whatever, and yell the words to, but also having stuff that we like enjoy, at least from my end, like having stuff that we enjoy playing artistically is challenging for us and fun, because like it's no fun to play the same 2 chords over and over and over, like so like or intricate loops or lead parts and verses, like even when it comes to writing like my drum parts and stuff like that, finding a way to keep things simple where it's necessary, and the choruses, and allow people maybe to kind of like jam along, sing along, something they'll catch in their head, but also having some of our songs have crazier intros or bridges where he's doing some wild looping lead that he layers over, and it harmonizes and it sounds sweet, and we're like really into it and just having fun jamming together and stuff like that. It's a little bit of both, but it's fun. It's interesting. It's challenging. I don't think he had. I know I hadn't been in a project like this prior to it, so it was definitely different than I think anything either of us had done musically before for this, and it's a little bit of an adventure, which keeps things interesting, but makes it fun for us and hopefully fun for people listening too.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's important. Let's talk about
the
new record, A Line in the Sand. Yeah, just a little bit.
Sure.
A Line in the Sand, out on Face Down Records. Can you tell us how, I guess, because you've had, you've been doing this for a few years now. At least you've got some EPs that came out over the past couple of years. This is your first full length. So what's that?
I said we're old.
You're old. Yeah, so old. But yeah, can you maybe, I guess, how did this album come together going into it? Did you have like a message or a goal in mind with it? Or was it just like songs you'd sort of written over time that you're like, it's time to put out an album?
We gave ourselves way too little time, actually.
There you go.
We knew it was coming, and we had a summer full of, we signed to Face Down, I guess what would have been like beginning of spring 2019 last year.
Okay.
Released Rise and Fall as kind of like a little like, hey, here's who we are to Face Down people, a couple singles. And then we knew that like within the next year, we were going to be writing and recording a full length, but going into that summer, we had a lot of tour dates and festivals. And so our thinking was like, we'll get home, take the fall to, a couple months to write and record, and then we'll hit the studio by like November. And we got home from the summer dates, early fall, started kind of writing, and then all of a sudden November was upon us, and we were like, shoot, this is, like we wanted to make them the best songs possible. And I know Evan can probably touch on this too. And it came up a little quicker than us, but we decided to push it back, the recording date, a little while after that, to give ourselves some more time to, like you said, like write the songs over time. And he can touch on some of lyrically what, where the inspiration came from. But, musically, it also gave us the ability to like kind of go back and revisit parts and try different things.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say I don't know if so much of if it was a time issue. It might have been a time issue. But I just hit like this massive wall of writer's block. And I think some of that was a time issue, like Jesse said. Like we were running, short on time. We hadn't really left ourselves a ton of time. But I think another main part of it was just kind of being burned out in my everyday life with I was working like crazy hours, and I think that it's really hard to be creative and be inspired when you're burning the candle at both ends and stuff like that. So through the winter period, I actually had just in my personal schedule an opportunity to step back from some things and actually have some free time. And then sort of the inspiration was a lot easier to come by at that point. So
that's a good point. Yeah, I think we both, for those listening, we both, like many bands of our size, have, full-time day jobs. So like, totally. We're also, when we say we gave ourselves a couple months to write, it wasn't a couple months of literally sitting at home and writing. It was a couple months of going to work for 12 plus hours a day and then getting home and trying to use our lunch breaks or the couple hours before bed to the few days off in between to write. So
but which is impressive because like at least musically the album is like a ton of energy and fun to listen to, and lyrically though, I know you mentioned there, Evan, that you kind of hit some writer's block or whatever, but I also get kind of the gist of that you're a band that doesn't like to waste your words, if that makes sense, because you definitely write some songs that have some powerful messages behind them. So I guess like out of that, like as it kind of going back to that original question about the album, did you sort of have like when it comes to writing a song, how does that come together, I guess, for you? Do you have are you a band that has a mission sort of thing, or are you just a band that writes whatever inspires you from here to there?
Yes and no, but or I guess not yes and no, a little bit of both. That makes more sense.
Yeah, I think the thing that we've always told people is that we write from our life experience and the things that we see going on around us and the things that we feel, the things that we're impacted by. We just try to be as genuine as possible. And you know, I've also said this part before, but I understand that there are bands who their goal is to write for a target demographic. Their goal is, you know, to market themselves to a specific subset of people, and so they write with that focus in mind.
No knock on those artists or people either, but
Right.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can say no knock on and then say, but we don't want to be anything
Right.
like that. So it's like people read between the lines, whatever. But you know what I mean? I just think like art is meaningful, and you can only the consumerism is only going to take you so far. And if you're always just looking for you know, who's gonna care about this, who's gonna like this, you're gonna be disappointed in the end, because at some point it's gonna ring hollow because you're chasing trends. And the albums that we put out, you know, anybody, I don't care how big or how small you are, they're gonna come out months after you wrote those songs. And so if you're always trying to chase a trend or what you think is hot or what you think is popular, then you're probably going to be disappointed. So we just try to be genuine, and let, you know, the songs be, or let the lyrics kind of reflect what's going on in life. But as far as like how it comes together, the writer's block actually wasn't on the lyrical side. The lyrics came together pretty quickly because what we do when we write a song, and typically I'll send a demo to Jesse that has where the melodies are completed, but we use what we call scratch lyrics, which most of the time are just comedy lyrics.
They're usually about pizza because that's usually what's on our mind. Pizza or tacos.
Yeah, or they're just about not having words. I did the entire, for anybody that's heard the album and heard the song "The King Is Alive," which is a lot of spoken word. I did that entire song scratch track where every lyric was about not having lyrics.
See, the bad thing about that is, side note, little rabbit hole insight here. It gets to the point where I listened to the demos so many times as we were writing the songs and using the scratch lyrics in place over a course of months that even after the record comes out, like still to this day, it's hard for me to, like, when I sing certain songs live or hear them or think about what to play, like to not say the scratch lyrics, like talking about pepperonis and cheese or just like it's bad, but
that's funny.
But yeah, that just sort of helps me to get the melodies out, and sometimes there's real lyrics that accompany that, or like maybe I'll have a real chorus and then the verses are, you know, just scratch or whatever. But then I like to wait until the last moment possible to write the lyrics. So you know, there was even for those who aren't familiar with the recording process, typically drums are recorded first. And so when Jesse was recording, I was, you know, sitting in the studio just being inspired by right, something like that.
Or
just being inspired by the process and just being in that moment of, okay, we're here and it's time to put my thoughts down. And so pretty much all 10 of those songs, the lyrics came together in the week of the recording. And that's something that I'm comfortable with. That's something that I've done a lot. So I don't go into that situation in panic mode. And like I said, some of the lyrics are done. If you went back and listened to some of the scratch tracks, they would have some of the real lyrics. But I think that just sort of allows me to make sure that there is cohesion there. Because I think if somebody listens to the album, they'll see that we cover like a pretty wide range of topics. But my goal is that they would see a common thread through all of those, even if that common thread is something as simple as like, you know, that we're convicted about these songs, you know, this is something that really matters to us. And I think if the lyrics come together in a short period of time, in like real world time, I think there's much more of a chance that you're going to end up with an album rather than a collection of songs. Because for me, an album can be all over the place musically, but it can still come together as an album when there's themes that sort of, you know, weave in and out of different songs. And actually I like albums that have more musical diversity. I get bored really quickly with albums where everything sounds the same, but lyrical diversity is something that, you know, you can be all over the map, but when you have that common thread that sort of weaves them all together, I think it sort of makes it feel more like an album, at least in my opinion. There's, you know, a lot of different ways to do it. I don't claim to have all the answers, but that's just kind of the way that we do it. So
I thought the whole point of this was to
I'm an
get all the
expert on
answers.
exactly one thing, and that is the way that we do things. And that's about it. So
but before we get into the Let Live album, I had a couple of quick things about the video for Unbreakable that I kind of wanted to ask. First, I love videos that are just like in the band's like jam space. For whatever reason, I've always like, even going back to like MXPX's video for Doing Time, for instance, I always just thought it was so awesome, right? So I'm assuming that is like, is that your jam space, or did you just set up down there for the video?
Yeah, that's our rehearsal space. It's in my basement. That was my first project of quarantine, was to build a little bit more of a permanent rehearsal space. We've always been in that area, but
that was part of it. We just
stuff that
couldn't go out and shoot a full you know, at the time, especially because it was basically done like right around the time everything was kicking off hardcore. So it wasn't even at the point where we're at now of like, things are still serious, but like we found ways to, you know, social distancing, masks, etc. It was like everybody was still in kind of that freak out mode, and so we were like,
well, you had to stay home in Michigan, at least at that point. You had to stay home unless it was for, you know, essential like, you know, to go get groceries or whatever.
Like, so what can we do? And it worked out. Like it worked out. Like it looks, you know, people seem to really, it's honestly connected better than any video we've done, anything we've put out before. So like, as simple and easy as it was, I think sometimes people appreciate that, especially in the punk and like hardcore crowd. Like, you know, it doesn't have to be some, you know, as much as we do have ideas for some more expansive like storyline stuff, like it doesn't have to be huge production to come over well. It was just fun too. We got in there. I think we shot it in a matter of like an hour. Like,
that's awesome.
Yeah, I think we played the song like 7 or 8 times, and that was it.
You mentioned that it was shot during like quarantine and whatnot. So are you guys actually 6 feet apart in the video at least?
We are. We are 6 feet apart, and our camera guy wore a mask and was very careful. And so it was I think those are the kind of videos that I always enjoy watching. So, you know, that's kind of what I lean towards. I'm sure at some point we'll try to do something a little bit more creative, and we have in the past too, but I think for me, I just want to see a band. I just want to see what they're all about. And I feel like you can get that vibe when you watch a performance video.
So now, if people didn't know that you're from Michigan, they probably got a pretty good idea after watching that video, though, because you've got Detroit sports memorabilia everywhere. In fact, like the first thing I noticed being from Canada was like the Red Wings flag, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then, you know, picking things up, the Pistons mug I thought was great. But
oh wow, that's a good pickup. That was tiny. That was barely in there.
So what were some of those, like, I mean, the Pistons mug was the one that made me think. I was like, okay, are some of these things like, they're almost Easter egg-ish, right? Like to watch it and sort of pick things up. I'm assuming you got like, is it show flyers that are in the background? Of shows you played?
They're tour posters from different tours that we've been on, which I say that's actually just the way that the practice space is always set up. If you go down there right now, that's what it looks like. But you can see. And I know this is an audio only thing, but if anybody was watching on the video, you could see 2 of my favorite tour posters that are behind me right now. I love saving tour posters. You know, tours, I think a lot of times they all blend together, you know, especially if you've gone back to the same city multiple times. And so I love saving them and being able to just kind of, I need to be in a space that makes me feel creative to be creative. And so my office is, you can see behind me is my bookcase with all my favorite books. If I read a book and I like it, I put it on my shelf, even if I never think I'm going to read it again. I want it to be in my space where I'm creating. And I have tour posters, and I have little, you know, I have my Groot bobblehead, and just like things that make me feel inspired and creative. So yeah, so we didn't set the space up to look like that. That's just the way that it looks. But
that's awesome. So I actually none of those were my questions about the video. I had a question for each of you. So first, Evan, I wanted to know, what's the shirt that you're wearing? I kept trying to figure out if it was for a band or something. Like in the video, it's got a ghost on it.
Is that a Stranger Things
yeah
shirt?
No, he means in the video, not the one that I'm
I was like, I saw the Hawkins.
Yes, this is a Stranger Things shirt. No, that shirt is for a band that we are good friends with. They're called Sink In,
awesome.
and they have a song. It's a really, really cool song. Everybody should go and check this out. They have an awesome 80s themed video for it, but it's called Ghost. And so they put out a line of merch.
That's what I meant. Stranger
promoting
Things,
that single,
like 80s. That's what I was trying to do.
So yeah, if people are into our music, they will definitely like the Sink In song Ghost. So go check it out.
There you go. Well, then that was definitely worth asking. Part of me was like, he's just going to say, oh, it's just some shirt I got off a shelf somewhere. I don't know.
Close.
But, close. So yeah. So Jesse, I was watching the video yesterday, one of my kids was sitting with me and she wanted me to ask you this. She says, how does he hit the drums so fast? I think you were doing a fill. I don't know if it was in I think it was in the verse. There's a specific tom fill that you did. She was like, how did he hit his drums so fast? So I got to ask you, man, how do you hit them so fast?
Well,
lots of practice.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I could answer it a couple different ways. I grew up like I said, watching guys like Dave Grohl and Travis Barker and Aaron Gillespie play drums, and so for me, there was two things that stood out about them. It was their power and the way they played and expressed themselves. They weren't, and there's some of my favorite drummers now, biggest influence now, are guys that are just sitting there kind of grooving and bobbing their head, but are super technical and stuff like that. And I love that. But these guys were just hitting the drums as hard as they can, and their whole bodies were being put into it. It wasn't just their wrists or their hands and stuff. And then second was just their over. The way they moved around the kit with that same amount of power and, like you said, speed, and they were somehow able to kind of mesh both of those, I guess. And so I grew up at first I wasn't traditionally trained. I ended up taking some drum lessons from an instructor, and that was a big part of developing the speed and the stick handling and stuff like that, which I highly suggest to anyone that is, some people are able to naturally pick it up, and my experience was a little bit of both. I grew up just watching those guys and basically just hitting as hard and playing as fast as I could. I know that sounds kind of like a cop-out answer, but honest to God, that was my first few years of playing drums, was just hitting things as hard and fast as I could. I want to be like those guys. And then as I grew into it a bit, I started getting more traditional instruction and saying okay, how should I hold my sticks? How can I move my wrists to be able to, hit a double stroke here and get two hits with one movement, so without getting too technical into it, that really is it. I guess I hit them as hard and fast as I can, and I try and walk off the stage without any energy left. If I walk off the stage and I'm not just falling flat on the floor exhausted after a show, I don't feel like I played fast enough. I don't feel like I played hard enough. So that's really what it's about for me, and obviously a little bit of the the traditional education, I guess, but.
Yeah. I can almost guarantee you my 5-year-old's not going to listen to that.
No, tell her I just hit as hard and fast as I can.
There we go. Too long didn't read. He hits hard and fast. He just does it.
I just do it. So I was trying to think of a way to answer that without just being like that. typical like cop out, like I just do it. No,
Yeah.
I'm just that good, like because I'm.
Well, I appreciate your thought out in the moment answer to my 5-year-old's question. It was good. Let's get into. I asked you guys when we were kind of setting this up. I said, well, let's talk about a record that influenced you, whether it was, influenced this album anyway, or just going in and being a band, making the music that you make, or just making music in general. And the album you guys picked was Fake History by Let Live. So I will say, I'll kind of start this off real quick, and then we'll get into, I guess, why you guys, love the music or love this record so much. I was actually introduced to the band Let Live through the song Stained Glass Ceilings by the Wonder Years, because Jason Butler has a feature on that song. And the first time I heard it, I was like, who is this? Like, because his part comes in and it is
so good.
Unbelievable. Yeah. I think we did an episode on The Greatest Generation and No Closer to Heaven.
Such an epic.
And yeah, and when I spoke about Stained Glass Ceilings, I said, I think that feature is probably one of my all-time favorite features, like of an artist coming on someone else's track and just absolutely smashing it, because he's so good. But I'll be honest, when I went and looked up who he was, like, okay, Let Live, I was familiar with the name. I put the music on initially and I was like, I don't know, it's a little different. And so that was kind of it for me. Like, I just kind of walked away. I was like, gave a couple songs, and then you guys suggested it. And I was like, okay, you know what? Every time I hear his feature, and he's obviously on the new Used record as well, right?
Yeah.
I was like, okay, let's go in, let's give it another shot. So listening to this record, I was actually like, by making myself listen to it, I was actually blown away. Like, it's such a good record from start to finish.
Yeah.
I love it's. To me, I had to write this down because I didn't want to get this wrong. But to me, it sounds like, stick with me on this one, that Fall Out Boy transitioned into a new metal band, while other parts sound like At the Drive-In had a musical baby with Rage Against the Machine, but My Chemical Romance was also in the room. There's so many sounds, I think, on this record, but it's better than all of those sounds combined, if that makes sense. Yeah, like I wouldn't even be able to describe it to someone accurately.
I think the really cool, the thing that helps the record to stand apart musically is that most punk bands and most metalcore bands for that matter base pretty much everything they do in chords. Hardcore bands sometimes will open up into riffs a little bit more, especially bands that play a little bit faster brand of hardcore. But I think that the punk scene for a really long time has sort of relegated riffs to like, oh, that's like a bluesy thing, or that's like a radio rock thing, or the thing that I hear all the time in the punk scene that's a butt rock, it's like what butt rock bands do. So like their willingness to sort of bring riffs and grooves into a hardcore vibe and a punk vibe, I don't think you see a ton of that. I think you see it sometimes, and there's
not
some
as much
of the
anymore, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's some of the groovier post-hardcore bands that they're usually the bands that have like the ultra clean singer who sings like 47 octaves above middle C, that kind of right. those kind of bands, but I don't think you really see a ton of that riff based stuff, because it's hard to do and sound original and not just like just jamming
that
away
in his vocal range too. Like he'll be just screaming, and there'll be just a thrashing punk beat behind it, and then they'll, without like any warning, just switch right into a like super melodic, catchy, harmonized chorus in like some like the kind of melody that gets stuck in your head, like that you would be singing over and over. And then there's some of those songs, a couple of the more chill songs on that record, like that are just super ambient and like almost soulful in a way. And like that's he talks about he's a really cool person to listen to, not just from his personal story, but like from his musical journey and some of the different things he was influenced by, because then you can really start to see like where they got some of their sound and stuff, like even talking about like taking some stuff from jazz and stuff and incorporating it into like punk and hardcore music. So it's it's a little bit of everything. You're right, like you nailed it. And that's, I think, why combined with some other things about their live performances, which are epic and legendary, like is why that was such a huge record for me.
I mean, I had a quick note here that literally just said manic vocals, because his voice, he could do so many different things with his voice that it's like a song never gets boring, no matter. I mean, I listened to this record. I think you guys, I want to say you picked it, you emailed like your pick a few days ago, maybe 4 or 5 days ago, whatever it was, but I've listened to it probably 6 or 7 times since then, like all the way through. Yeah. I mean, part of it's doing a lot of driving around. I was like today I listened to it 2.5 times, I think, through it's like, it's so good. But I do have to ask, I guess, so there's 2 different releases for this record. Which record is your release that when you put it on, it's the one you listen to, like the original where it ends at
day 54?
Day 54.
The album ends at day
release.
54 for me, personally.
Thank you. Good. Okay. Yeah.
Like the bottom line is that whenever there's a re-release, so we were just talking about this for something else, but whenever there's a re-release, bands feel like they want to do something extra for their fans because they don't want it to look like a money grab. Obviously, like there's most bands do care about their fans and they're not just trying to extract as much money from them as possible. So they want to try to do something cool, and I think it's cool that the 3 songs were tacked onto the end, but for me the album ends at day 54 because artistically that's where it was meant to wrap up. And I know we just put out an album where the thought that went into the last track and that track being the last track was that was something that we were looking at way down the at the very closer to the beginning of the creative process. And then to go back and add 3 songs on, that would be cool, but I think everybody would realize that the emotional end of the album was that song. So
100%. And like both with your record and this one is like it's the closing track is clearly a closing track, right? Like and that's the feeling I get when going into, because I guess it was Epitaph released, like did the second release with the 3 songs tacked on the end. And I mean, from a business standpoint, like you said, you kind of get it. Like, okay, people will go out and buy this, and if they already had it, maybe they'll buy this one too. But the record, like that's a closing track of closing tracks, right?
Yeah.
Like they
they
leave it all on the table.
100% agree. Like that's how it is for me too. I mean, I dig the extra tracks, like they're good songs, like but that's I first heard the album as it was first intended, and that's kind of I still, that's the only version that's on like Spotify and stuff too, the new one I should say,
the Epitaph version,
re-release. So like those new songs, they're good and stuff, and I still will jam them and stuff when I'm listening through like on my phone and stuff. But I like to go I mean, the original way the record was written, like Evan said, at least for us, we're always very intentional about how we want the record to start and how we want it to end. So
totally.
And the other thing about Day 54 is that it kind of brings together all of the themes of it's not just about like one thing. It sort of floats between the themes. And this is probably, I would say, the most personal of Let Live's records. They start to get a little bit more political after that, and a little bit more sort of like outwardly like focused lyrically, just kind of pointing out things that are going on. And not that there's isn't any of that on this album, there is, but just sort of, it almost seems like Day 54 is the song I'm talking about. It almost seems like stream of consciousness, like going through all of the things that he's kind of already ticked off on the album, and discussing those sort of one by one and moving between topics. And so it seems like a natural place for the album to end.
I'm glad we talked about the closing track first.
It's kind of
the
funny.
Natural order that we should do this, because I did get you guys to pick a song each, and then I picked. I didn't share the song I picked. Yeah, well, that's fair. It's fair that it's not fair. And I didn't write down who picked what, but I know one of you picked Le Prologue and the 666.8
that was me.
I feel like that's almost a tongue.
That was you. The reason I gave you I guess technically it's two because the prologue is an intro track, but they merge together. There's no like track breaks, and they kind of I always almost listen to them as one. Like I think for me, like I've always loved like epic intro tracks like that just build like that drum part at the beginning and just gets you hype. Like the energy is huge, and it also like lyrically, one of the reasons Let Live was so huge for me is like, and Jason, I should say Jason Butler individually has been a huge influence on me, is just his willingness to be 100% unfiltered all of the time, speaking up for whatever he believes in or whatever he sees going on in the world, whether he's experienced in his own life or, as Evan said, like later on in the Let Live days, and now with Fever 333 getting super political and stuff like that, and outspoken about those things. And this song quite literally says, you know, stand up, and he's talking like it epitomized for me what they manifested in their live shows, what he would talk about between songs live, and what they would write their lyrics on. And it wasn't until that point that I had really connected with a band that kind of stood up that way, but also just like that break from when the drums are pounding and he's kind of speaking over the music at the beginning, and then when it comes in just full force and he just starts screaming, like you said, like that vocal range, like it's so epic. And then the 6.8 billion, we talked about kind of like the range both musically and vocally that him and the band have, and being able to write catchy hooks but also like thrashing like punk and hardcore parts, and like it goes right in that big fast punk beat at the beginning of that song for the verse, and then the choruses on that song are so catchy and harmonized and stuff, and it sounds, it runs the gamut, as Evan likes to say, of of their styles, I guess. And I mean, I love the message behind the song, but musically as well, both of those kind of touch on every single point. And I know it may be kind of cliche to pick the first two songs on the record, but as the more I thought about it, like those were the first two songs. Like I had, like you had heard some of their stuff before that. Like I knew who they were, but I heard that record, and those first two songs, or I guess one song ish, one and a half, and it changed my life. Like that band changed my life after that, and so those two have always held a place in my heart for that reason. That's what got me connected to that band.
Well, it's great because you said like it kind of runs the gamut, as you said, and it really like sets up what you can expect, I think, for the rest of the record, right? Like as far as lyrics are concerned, as far as sound is concerned, like even the talking that he does right off the beginning, he does that a couple of times on the record, and it's always like I don't know. I guess just the uniqueness of it, and they just kind of set it up and say, all right, this is what you're going to get. If you haven't heard Let Live before,
I was just
going to
say,
coming.
anytime someone asks me, like when I bring up Let Live and someone asks me about them, or like, oh, maybe I'll have to check them out, that's what I send them. I send them Fake History, but I say start at the beginning, just hit play on Prologue, and just listen to those two first.
Don't be one of those weird people who starts an album in the middle,
or just goes to the top five. Just goes to the top 5 on Spotify when they're finding a new band. Like if I hear a song come over, like a new band I haven't heard on the radio, or a song come over on like shuffle or something, the first thing I do is I go to that artist, I go to their like latest album, and I like hit play from the beginning, like.
Right. Yeah. No, that's fair. So, I guess that means it was Evan who picked Renegade 86 then.
Yeah. So
I think. What do you love about that song?
Well, going back to kind of what we talked about, just kind of that willingness to really have like a groove, like riff verse, like it's just so rare in punk music right now. But then dropping into more of a melodic chorus, that's a really catchy chorus, like what Jesse mentioned earlier. And then I really love the bridge. I think it was sort of some foreshadowing. It had that like, it had like a hip hop swagger to it before we ever knew that Jason was gonna do something more hip hop ish, which is
Right.
if you hear the Fever 333, which he jumps into there, and you can just sort of see all of their influences coming together. The hardcore stuff, the groovy kind of riffy guitar playing, the punk attitude, and then just sort of that. It's not spoken word in a way that you would hear spoken word in like a listener song or or even like the kind of spoken word that we do. It's more like you said, he's just sort of talking over it, like that you will hear in hip hop music, where they're just sort of like setting up what they're about to say, sort of ad lib talking over it, and there's just an authenticity that comes with it. And so I get the sense that Renegade 86 is a pretty personal song. It's pretty poetic. So I'm not going to try to decode everything that he's talking about, but from a musical standpoint, and then I just feel
also
like
it's got one of the most epic, like one of my favorite, I don't know if you call it a bridge or like a break, but the record books is just
that's what I was just about
epic.
to say. Anybody can listen to that and just feel like they're they can just go punch bricks or something. I don't know. If you felt like punching bricks, that would be what you would want to listen to first. You could probably punch through some bricks, but you feel sort of like empowered by that. It's I just think it's a great follow up to Le Prologue 666. I think it sort of sets the foundation for the album, and before they branch off into a few different directions. It sort of like just kind of sets the tone.
I'm glad you went to the bridge, because that was like my notes were all about the bridge of this song, if that's what we're calling it. And just like the hip hop influence, because right before the copyright in the record books line, or maybe it's a little bit before, but anyway, there's a Notorious B.I.G. reference in there, and like, so he just it's 100% like, and then when he delivers that line, like, I'm copyrighting the record books, like just like the cockiness, almost like when he says the confidence, whatever, it's just 100%. That was the first thought I had. It was like, and I mean, those influences come up later on the album in different places. Sometimes, I don't know if they come across to me as like Rage Against the Machine influence, but obviously Rage is influenced by hip hop, so it just kind of comes together pretty great. But it's a great song. The song that I picked, I didn't share this with you, so this is like the most like, I almost went with like the next track, because I was like, well, we've done the first 3 tracks, why not go track 4? But I went with the song Mother. And as soon as like that song, to me, I mean, obviously it's telling the story of like from what I gather, like his mom having an affair while his dad was in jail, I think, is what I gathered. It's definitely
about infidelity.
100%. But just the whole way it comes together. So again, I feel like he sings so like delicately on the first verse on this song, and then it comes in and he kind of really opens up. And then the second or third verse, depending on how you want to look at how the song's structured, like with the feature, I don't know who I got her name, Chelsea Warlick. I don't know what she's from, like if she sings in a band or what. I couldn't find anything. The only like music credit that I could find on the internet was this song. So
I can't remember who,
but it's just cool how she comes in.
You can find it out there. He's like, they've mentioned it before, but I can't remember.
So, but like she comes in and she sings like the part of, I mean, assuming what I'd kind of researched on this song is like the part of his mom in this story type thing. And it's just, it comes together a little bit like a musical at times, just the way he's telling a story, and they're doing it, lyrically as well as like, I guess, audibly in this song. And then it really takes a turn at the end where like the whole outro of the song is a completely different song. Basically, it's just such a cool song, but it also like makes you it makes you feel right. Like, and maybe I'm looking into it a little more because I've been listening to the Hamilton soundtrack a ton lately.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, hearing like musical things in my brain. And
well, the outro is very theatrical, and it almost is a little. It strikes me as like a little bit sarcastic.
Right. Yeah.
It's sort of with the like almost like with the ragtimey piano, like the syncopated piano, and then just like repeating that line, or maybe it's not sarcastic but insincere, like just if I repeat like "Don't you cry, mama, we'll be okay" just over and over and over, maybe I'll believe it, maybe she'll believe it.
Right.
But yeah, I have to be honest, the first time that I heard that outro and it, and the length of the outro, I was sort of like, it was jarring. It was just sort of like that's not where I expected the song to go. It's not really where I wanted the song to go. But the more that you listen to it and you think about it in the context of the other stuff that he writes, where it sort of starts to fit, or it almost feels like somebody like losing their mind as you get closer and closer to the end of the song, and it is a really cool and very unique outro, not something that you would, I think, hear in a lot of songs in this genre.
Yeah, no, it's I don't know. I agree when you said or maybe Jesse said it wasn't fair that I made you pick one song.
Yeah, I couldn't
because I was going through to try well, when I was going through to try and pick my song, I was like, well, I could do this one or this one and I just kept going through. And because
that's the
with
thing
this
about
album,
this record, you can listen to it all the way through, like over and over. There's not, many bands that I like and many bands that have songs that I love, or even a few songs that I love, but there's not many albums that, I mean, there's a lot of like I said, I enjoy listening to albums in general, like from like all the way through, but like this one stands out as one that now, almost 10 years later, a little over actually, from the original release of that, I can listen to over and over and over on a weekly basis and still not get sick of.
Like it's energetic, it's aggressive, it's weird, but it's also accessible. Like it's all of it, and I don't know, it's great. So I was a little skeptical when you first mentioned it, and I'm a supporter of this record now. It's awesome. Fantastic. I'm looking forward to driving back across Canada and listening to it countless more times and not getting bored of it.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's something that is really unique in this day and age. Streaming is awesome because it's made so many more bands so much more accessible, and you can find bands that might be a lot smaller and maybe don't have the resources to tour to your area. But I do think that it incentivizes, sort of cherry picking a song here or there, and creating just sort of like totally curating your musical experience and not having to listen to anything that you don't want to listen to or anything like that, which obviously, when back in the days of records, or even to cassettes to a little lesser extent, because you could fast forward, and then CDs because you could skip a track. But now we're in an age where there's not really a whole lot of incentive to listen all the way through an album. But when you do, I think that you get the whole picture. And with this album, it's just easy to do that because there's not songs that you want to skip. So I think that's going to become the new calling card of what does it mean to put out a great album. It's not a great single or how many singles happens to chart or something like that. Right. And it's going to be what albums are strong start to finish, and if you can do that, then you are truly creating a great album, in my opinion.
There you go. That's it. That's all I got. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I had a great time.
Thank you
so much for having us,
and thanks for coming on.
I'm glad that Bear didn't come up behind you.
the Detroit Pistons have just shocked the Los Angeles Lakers. 187 to win the NBA title.